understand a personality like this. It's Regina George. She's known as one of the most iconic and most infamous villains in film history, probably of all time. But why is she this way? For this video, let's look at Regina George's personality and affect from a Freudian perspective. Firstly, let's look at her personality structure. So Freud posited that the personality had three main components. So it had the id, the ego, and the superego. Let's break them down. Let's start with the id. The id is the source of all energy, according to Freud. The id constantly seeks a reduction of tension. In understanding the id, there's also what's called the pleasure principle. What the pleasure principle means is that the id is pursuant of all things pleasurable and avoidant of all things painful. Freud also thought that there was the superego, which is basically the part of our personality that rules our ethical standards. If anyone has seen Mean Girls, they would know that Regina actually doesn't have any moral standards. Freud thought that the third component of personality was ego, which basically is the driving force for us to satisfy our id's primitive urges through constraint. There are three more parts to the personality: the conscious, the pre-conscious, and the unconscious. So let's break down the conscious. The conscious is literally what we are conscious of. So it's immediately what's in the prefrontal cortex or the mind's eye, or what you're immediately thinking about. So in Regina's case, her consciousness would be things that she was constantly preoccupied with: sex, losing weight, food, eating carbs.
Is butter a carb? Yes.
Being in control, maintaining her status as the queen bee. The pre-conscious part of our personality is what we've actually stored away in our memory. So it's things that you have to kind of be reminded of. And in Regina's case, it was the bird book.
Oh my God, I remember this. Ugh, I haven't looked at that in forever.
It was her mysterious fallout with Janice Ian, which we never actually fully understand in the movie. And also her relationship with Aaron Samuels. Now, another part of personality through a Freudian lens is family dynamics and structure. Amy Poehler was iconic as Regina's mom. But what I forgot to mention here is that Regina grew up in a sexually and emotionally permissive household. Freud actually was one of the first, if not the first, scientists that said that humans go through stages as they grow up. He also ascertained that early life experiences dictate the way that we are throughout our entire life. When we're young, Freud basically said that we go through three distinct stages: the oral stage, the anal stage, and the phallic stage. Eventually, once we pass these three stages, we get to the latency stage, and then we get to the genital stage. Let's start with the oral stage because this one is super important for this entire video. Freud said that this was pretty much the first 2 years of anyone's life. The oral stage looks like sucking your thumb, constantly putting things in your mouth. You get the idea. Babies do this all the time. And this is actually exhibited in the movie when Regina is constantly eating. You notice she is constantly putting food in her mouth, whether it's carbs, whether it's caltine bars, she's just constantly eating.
Whatever, I'm getting cheese fries.
The second stage of growth in personality is the anal stage, which according to Freud lasted between 2 to 3 years old. And finally, the third stage of development in a child's life is the phallic stage, which lasts between 4 to 5 years old. In this stage, we'll actually have for girls what Freud called penis envy. This is weird, but Freud would say that Regina, the reason why, or one of the reasons why she was so aggressive, especially to her parents, is that she realized as a young girl that she lacked a penis. If you notice in the film, she's very aggressive to her mother, which actually is very on point with what Freud said about girls.
Right, Regina? Please stop talking. Okay.
You only see the dad in one clip, but Freud would say that during penis envy of girls, they're actually a little bit more seductive with their fathers. They want to kill their mothers and they want to seduce their fathers. There's only one scene where the dad is actually shown, but it's a very important one.
The hardcore girls just wear lingerie and some form of animal ears.
Doesn't she look great, honey?
In this scene, you actually see Regina's dad mourning his daughter's innocence. So in personality, emotions are a huge component of who we are as people, especially according to Freud. Freud thought that every drive within us, every emotion, every expenditure of energy is either sexual or aggressive. So spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Mean Girls, Regina does eventually get hit by a bus towards the end of the movie. But this is a very key component, thinking in Freudian terms, because she actually learns how to channel her energy, all of her anger, all of her rage, into sports. She joins sports because that is a way for her to release all of the pent-up aggression in a healthy and cathartic way.
Regina's spine healed, and her physical therapist taught her to channel all her rage into sports. It was perfect because the jock girls weren't afraid of her.
Finally, one of the most important aspects of Regina's personality is her personality types or traits. She, overwhelmingly so, has an oral fixation. So Freud thought that we have fixations, which is basically where we get caught at one of those stages that I mentioned earlier. Some of us get stuck in the oral stage, some of us get stuck in the phallic stage, some of us get stuck in the anal stage, hence the term anally retentive. Regina, overwhelmingly so, is stuck in her oral stage. This is exhibited by eating a bunch, as I mentioned before. People who are stuck in oral stages, they say if you have an oral personality, you're very narcissistic, you have a need for control, you have a need for manipulation, and you have very aggressive demands. This is Regina George in a nutshell. How Freud viewed theory of change is that people need to be conscious of their fixations, of whatever stage they are stuck in from their childhood. In Regina's case, a psychoanalyst would say that she needs to become conscious of her oral fixation and learn how to channel this energy in a much healthier way.
Okay, so what we could do today is a couple exercises to help you express your anger in a healthy way.
She needs to learn how to redistribute her energy in a healthier way that's without guilt and without destruction. Or another way of putting it, referring back to the id, ego, and superego, is harnessing control of her id so that her ego and superego could flourish. So regarding human nature, Freud believed that we are all born bad, and society's role is to constrict our aggressive and sexual urges. In Regina's case, the amount of privilege and permissive parenting that she grew up with really didn't do the job that society was supposed to do. Another really important part of human nature, according to Freud, is that he believed that we all have drive. So Freud believed that there's a constant state of excitation within the body, otherwise known as our drive. From Regina's high extroversion, need to manipulate and have control, it's evident that she has much cathartic id energy within her, and that her id energy needs to be expended in other ways. According to Freud, our psychopathology results in unmet needs from our earlier development, hence the fixation. Freud would say that Regina's unmet needs are a danger to her ego. Thus, the anxiety and aggression from the id actually sets in. Freud also believed that everyone has a life instinct and a death instinct. The life instinct, which is actually a lot simpler than you might think, is the need to procreate or reproduce the organism. It's also called eros and includes the libido, and we know that Regina had a very high libido. The death instinct, also called thanatos, everyone basically has it, but a lot of people, according to Freud, actually turn away from it because it's such a scary topic, and they actually direct it on other people through aggression. This is actually perfectly highlighted in the film when Regina, spoiler alert, gets hit by a bus.
Oh! Do you know what everyone says about you? They say that you're a homeschooled jungle freak who's a less hot version of me. Yeah. so don't try to act so innocent. You can take that fake apology and shove it right up your hairy...
And that's how Regina George died. No, I'm totally kidding. But she did get hurt.
The end of the film actually shows a huge paradigm shift, almost as if the energy from her id actually gets channeled back into her ego and superego. Hence the sports involvement. She has a healthy way of directing all of her rage and all of her anger towards sports. Another important thing to remember about Regina is her relationships and the impact that her personality and emotions has over them. According to Freud, anxiety represents a painful emotion that acts as a signal of danger to the ego. Hence why Regina gets very upset when Katie is actually interested in Aaron, her ex-boyfriend. An important point to note about this film, as well as Regina and her whole system, is that there is an overwhelming lack of diversity. Diversity, if you notice, is not really present in this film. And if it is, it's more tokenized, especially that awful scene about the stereotypical different kinds of people at the tables. And I'll just play it here.
Asian nerds, cool Asians, varsity jocks, unfriendly black hotties, girls who eat their feelings, girls who don't eat anything, desperate wannabes, burnouts, sexually active band geeks, the greatest people you will ever meet, and the worst. Beware of the plastic.
There's also a huge amount of privilege that Regina has, which I believe that her privilege is the whole reason why she's so reckless. She's so in touch with her id and not many other parts of her ego or superego. She has a very uninhibited part of herself. She has very destructive relational patterns, and she also has that lovely oral fixation. So Freud himself, I have a love-hate relationship with him and his theories. I think that he was a brilliant person. He had groundbreaking theories. He relied heavily on intuition for him to kind of create the things that he created for us to understand personality. However, he was incredibly misogynistic. The things that he says about children and their obsession, just to me, I find it disgusting and weird. And even when I was talking about the anal and phallic stages, I felt uncomfortable. The other critique that I have of his theory is that it was never actually put through empirical data. There was no research that actually supported his theories until long after he was gone. And I think probably people were so afraid of how revolutionizing and influential he was as a theorist and as a doctor that they didn't want to actually scrutinize his theory by putting it through research. Sadly, though, if you're a therapist or a psychologist, Freud is inevitable. His language is inevitable. His concepts are inevitable and immortal. And little did I know, after watching Mean Girls for this project for the 1000th time, it is incredibly Freudian. I had no idea. And Regina's personality is only just a small part of how the rest of the film has so many Freudian concepts. The animalistic urges.
I knew how this would be settled in the animal world.
And let's face it, Gretchen Wieners herself is a whole case study that Freud probably would have eaten up.
To totally just stab